The morning started like any other in the great halls of the Galactic Council. Delegates from dozens of worlds took their seats in the massive chamber that floated in space above Nexus Prime. The room buzzed, with the usual sounds of different species greeting each other in their various languages. Kethvar, the tall blue-skinned representative from Zephyr, settled into his seat and looked around. Something felt different, but he couldn't quite place what it was. The crystalline beings sparkled in their corner, their bodies catching the artificial starlight. The reptilian saurians sat in their heated section, their scales gleaming. Everything seemed normal. Then it hit him. Ambassador Chen wasn't there. The human section sat empty. Not just Chen's chair, but all of them. Kethvar frowned. Humans were never late. In 40 years of membership, they had missed exactly 0 sessions. They were the ones who always arrived early, bringing extra data pads and offering to help other delegates with technical difficulties. "Where are the humans?" asked Veltar, the council president. Her crystalline form shifted from blue to concerned yellow. "Perhaps they're running late," suggested General Krax of the Saurian Empire. His forked tongue flicked out dismissively. "You know how primitive their transportation can be." But hours passed and no humans arrived. Kethvar tried to contact the human embassy. The communication system said the line was disconnected. He tried Chen's personal communicator. Nothing. It was as if the entire human diplomatic corps had simply vanished. The session continued without them, but everyone felt the absence. Humans had this way of asking the right questions at the right time. They would point out problems that other species missed. They had a talent for finding solutions that worked for everyone. Without them, the meeting felt incomplete. After the session ended, Kethvar decided to visit the human embassy. The building stood in the diplomatic quarter, a simple structure compared to the elaborate palaces other species built. He had always admired its clean lines and practical design. The doors were locked. Through the windows, he could see empty rooms. Not messy empty like someone had left in a hurry. Clean empty, like they had never been there at all. Every desk was clear. Every wall was bare. Even the plants were gone. Kethvar felt a chill run through his blue skin. This wasn't right. He contacted building security. "When did the humans leave?" he asked the Nexari guard. "Leave?" "They didn't leave," the guard replied, checking his records. "They just stopped coming. 3 days ago, Ambassador Chen walked out like he did every evening, but he never walked back in. None of them did." Over the next few days, reports came in from across the galaxy. Human trade ships had stopped responding to communications. The busy merchant stations that humans ran had gone dark. Human cargo vessels, which had been as reliable as sunrise for decades, simply weren't showing up at their scheduled destinations. The Corvin Mining Consortium sent worried messages. Human freighters were supposed to pick up shipments from their asteroid mines. The ships never came. When Corvin vessels went to check on human shipping hubs, they found automated systems running perfectly, but no people anywhere. Dr. Zenth of the Ethereal Collective tried reaching her human research partners. The scientists she had worked with for 20 years had vanished without a word. Their laboratories were clean and organized but empty. Research projects they had been excited about just days earlier sat abandoned. The strangest reports came from human space itself. Scout ships sent to check on human colonies found something impossible. The worlds were still there. The cities still ran. But there were no humans. On New Geneva, Captain Yerlix of the Altarian Navy walked through empty streets. Traffic lights still worked. Public transport moved on schedule. Gardens were perfectly maintained by automated systems. But not a single human could be found anywhere. "It's like they all decided to take a vacation at the same time," Yerlix reported back. But they left everything running. Similar reports came from every human world. Kepler Station, humanity's largest space habitat, still hummed with activity. Factories produced goods. Power systems ran smoothly. But the corridors that once echoed with human voices were silent. The only clue was a single message found in the central computer of every human facility. The text was simple and polite, written in perfect galactic standard. "Thank you for the opportunity to participate. We wish you well." That was it. No explanation. No emergency. No distress call. Just a polite goodbye from an entire species. President Veltar called an emergency council session. The chamber felt strange with the human section empty. For 40 years, those seats had been filled with eager faces, Humans scribbling notes and asking thoughtful questions. Now there was just empty space. "This is unprecedented," Veltar announced, her crystalline body shifting to worried orange. "An entire species cannot simply disappear." "Perhaps they were conquered," suggested General Krax. "Some enemy might have invaded human space." But the scout report said otherwise. There were no signs of battle. No destroyed cities or burned worlds. Everything was peaceful and well-maintained. It was as if 6 billion humans had simply decided to leave, taking only their personal belongings. "Maybe they evolved," suggested Dr. Morphix of the Zephyrian Science Council. "Became energy beings or something." But that didn't explain the empty coffee cups found on desks, still warm when the first search teams arrived, or the half-finished meals in restaurants, prepared but never served. This wasn't evolution. This was evacuation. The more they investigated, the stranger it became. Humans hadn't just left their worlds. They had prepared for their departure with incredible care. Every important system had backup power for years. All environmental controls were set to maintain perfect conditions. They had even left detailed instruction manuals for other species who might want to use their facilities. It was as if they wanted their former homes to remain perfect, waiting for someone else to claim them. Weeks passed with no word from humanity. The galactic news networks ran constant stories about the human mystery. Some species thought it was fascinating. Others found it disturbing. But everyone agreed on one thing. The galaxy felt different without humans. Trade routes that had run smoothly for decades began having problems. Diplomatic meetings that humans used to help organize descended into confusion. Small conflicts that humans had been quietly managing began to flare up. Kethvar found himself missing Chen's thoughtful questions during council sessions. The human ambassador had a way of getting to the heart of complex issues. He could make two arguing species realize they actually wanted the same thing, just from different angles. Now those species just kept arguing. The galaxy was learning something it had never realized before. Humans hadn't just been members of galactic civilization. They had been the oil that kept the great machine running smoothly, and now they were gone. The empty chairs in the council chamber seemed to grow larger each day, a silent reminder of the species that had vanished as quietly as morning mist, leaving behind only questions and a galaxy that suddenly seemed much lonelier than before. 6 months after the humans disappeared, the galaxy began to fall apart. It started small. Trade routes that had worked perfectly for decades suddenly had problems. Ships arrived late or got lost completely. Cargo that should have taken days to deliver now took weeks. The complex web of commerce that connected thousands of worlds began to tangle and break. Minister Voketh of the Corvin Mining Consortium stared at the reports on his desk with growing alarm. Profit margins were falling. Delivery schedules were chaos. 3 major mining operations had shut down completely. "I don't understand it," he told his assistant. "These routes worked fine for 40 years. Now everything is breaking down." His assistant, a young Corvin named Jex, looked nervous. "Sir, I've been looking into this. It seems like humans were running most of the logistics programming." "Impossible," Voketh snorted. "We Corvins are the greatest miners in the galaxy. We know how to run our own operations." But Jex pulled up the data files, screen after screen of code, all written in human programming languages. The elegant algorithms that decided which asteroids to mine, which routes to take, how to schedule deliveries. All of it was human work. "They never made a big deal about it," Jex explained. "They just offered to help optimize our systems years ago. Made everything run 20% more efficiently. We thought it was a minor improvement. Now that the humans were gone, those systems were breaking down. Without constant updates and maintenance, the programs were making mistakes. Ships were sent to empty asteroids. Valuable cargo sat in warehouses because the delivery schedules were all wrong. The Corvins weren't the only ones with problems. Across the galaxy, species were discovering how much they had depended on human help without even realizing it. Dr. Zenth of the Ethereal Collective found herself staring at research projects that had ground to a complete halt. The Ethereals were known for their brilliant theoretical minds. They could grasp complex concepts that other species couldn't even pronounce, but now their greatest thinkers sat in empty laboratories, unable to make progress. "What's wrong with us?" Dr. Zenth asked her colleague, Dr. Morphus. "We solved quantum mechanics and stellar engineering. Why can't we figure out these protein structures?" Dr. Morphus flickered with confused colors. "I think we lost something when the humans left." They had this way of asking simple questions that made us think differently. It was true. Humans had never been the smartest species in the council. Their brains were smaller than ethereal consciousness matrices. Their thinking was slower than Zephyrian logic processors. But they had something else. A way of looking at problems from unexpected angles. When ethereal scientists got stuck on a complex theory, a human researcher would ask something basic like, "But what if you turned it upside down?" Or, "What would happen if this part was actually the most important?" These simple questions often led to breakthrough discoveries. Now, without those annoying human interruptions, the ethereal collective found their thinking had become circular. They could process information brilliantly, but they couldn't generate truly new ideas. The problems were showing up everywhere. The Altarian Defense Force discovered that their patrol routes had been quietly managed by human advisors for 30 years. Without human coordination, their ships kept running into each other or leaving important areas undefended. The Zephyrian Cultural Ministry found that their most successful art exhibitions had been curated with human help. Humans understood how to present Zephyrian crystalline sculptures in ways that other species could appreciate. Without that translation, interspecies cultural exchange was becoming difficult. Even the fearsome Saurian Empire was struggling. General Krax looked over military reports with growing frustration. Border conflicts that had been quiet for years were heating up. Small disputes were escalating into serious confrontations. What changed? He demanded from his intelligence officers. Commander Vex, his most trusted aide, looked uncomfortable. "Sir, it appears that human diplomatic teams were managing several potential conflict zones. They were so quiet about it that we didn't realize they were involved." Krax's eyes narrowed. "Explain." 3 years ago, the Bellari system had a border dispute with the Yendri colonies. Both sides were preparing for war. Then human mediators got involved. They helped negotiate a trade agreement that satisfied everyone. The conflict disappeared, so the same thing happened in the Corrin sector, the Vidal Nebula, and the Outer Rim territories. In each case, human peacekeepers stepped in before we even knew there was a serious problem. They prevented wars before they could start. Now those human peacekeepers were gone. Old grievances were surfacing. Border disputes that had been solved were being reopened. Minor trade disagreements were turning into diplomatic incidents. But the most serious problem was happening on Nexus Prime itself. The great space station that served as the galactic capital was having technical difficulties. Systems that had run perfectly for decades were starting to fail. Chief Engineer Tralix of the Nexus Maintenance Division was practically pulling his tentacles out with stress. The station's main computer was showing error messages he had never seen before. Life support systems were fluctuating. The artificial gravity had failed in 3 sections. "I need human technicians," he told President Veltar during an emergency meeting. The humans wrote most of the core programming for this station. "Without their maintenance protocols, everything is breaking down." Veltar's crystalline body flashed angry red. "We can't depend on one species for critical systems. Get our own technicians to fix it." But it wasn't that simple. Human programming was different from what other species used. It was more intuitive, less formal. Human programmers seemed to write code the way they spoke, in a flowing, natural style that was hard for other species to understand. More importantly, the humans had been updating and improving the station's systems for 4 decades. They knew every quirk, every shortcut, every backup system. That knowledge had walked out the door with them. As the months passed, the situation grew worse. Ships began disappearing in hyperspace because the navigation beacons that humans had established were failing. The complex network of jump routes that connected the galaxy was falling apart without human maintenance. The Galactic News Service reported that trade was down 30%. Scientific cooperation was at its lowest level in centuries. 3 different wars had started in the outer systems. President Veltar called another emergency council session. The chamber was fuller than usual. Species that rarely attended were now coming, looking for solutions to problems they couldn't handle alone. "We need to find the humans," she announced. "The galaxy needs them." "Why?" asked General Krax. "We managed fine before they joined the council," Dr. Zenth spoke up from the ethereal section. "Did we? I've been reviewing historical records. In the 40 years since humans joined, we've had fewer wars, more scientific breakthroughs, better trade relationships, and more successful diplomatic agreements than in the previous 2 centuries combined." The chamber fell. silent as delegates processed this information. "You're saying the humans were responsible for galactic peace?" asked Minister Voketh. "Not responsible," Dr. Xenth corrected. "They were the catalyst. They made the rest of us better at working together." Kethvar stood up in the Zephyrian section. "I think we misunderstood them. We thought they were junior partners because they were new to space. But they weren't learning from us. We were learning from them." The realization hit the chamber like a wave. The species that they had often dismissed as primitive and emotional had been the glue holding galactic civilization together. The humans had been managing conflicts, optimizing systems, facilitating cooperation, and fostering innovation while everyone else took credit for the results, and now they were gone. President Veltar's body shifted through several colors before settling on a deep, worried blue. "We need to organize search expeditions, find out where they went and why they left." But even as she spoke the words, a terrible thought occurred to many delegates. What if the humans didn't want to be found? What if they had left because they were tired of holding everyone else together? What if they had finally realized that the galaxy didn't deserve them? The largest search operation in galactic history began 3 months later. President Veltar stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity's Hope as the massive fleet prepared to jump into human space. 12 different species had contributed ships to the search. Even the usually isolationist ethereal collective had sent their fastest scout vessels. "This is unprecedented cooperation," Admiral Zorex of the Altarian Navy observed. His forearms moved over the control panels with practiced efficiency. "I've never seen so many different species work together on a single mission." Veltar's crystalline form flickered with ironic humor. "The humans would have loved this. They always said we could accomplish great things if we just learned to cooperate." The fleet was massive. Over 200 ships from across the galaxy. Corvin mining vessels equipped with deep space sensors, Zephyrian exploration cruisers built for long-range reconnaissance, Saurian military ships ready for combat if they found humans under attack. Even the mysterious Voidwalkers had sent a ship, though nobody was quite sure what it looked like since it existed in several dimensions at once. Everyone expected to find evidence of war, or plague, or some terrible disaster that had forced humanity to evacuate their worlds. The optimists hoped to find humans hiding on remote planets waiting to be rescued. The pessimists feared they would find only graves. Nobody expected what they actually discovered. The first shock came when they reached the edge of human space. Long-range sensors picked up activity from every human world. Power signatures were normal. Communications networks were active. Orbital facilities were operational. "They're still there," Captain Yerlix reported from his Altarian cruiser. "All human worlds show normal life support and industrial activity." But when the ships moved closer, the truth became clear. The worlds were active, but empty. Commander Thex landed her shuttle on New Geneva, humanity's second-largest colony world. The city spread out before her team like a perfect museum display. Streets were clean. Buildings were maintained. Traffic lights still changed from red to green in their programmed patterns, but there were no humans anywhere. "This is impossible," Dr. Krenex whispered, as they walked through the empty streets. The Corvin scientist's rocky exterior was trembling with unease. Cities don't run themselves, but apparently they could. Automated systems maintained every aspect of the urban environment. Robotic gardeners tended the parks. Cleaning machines kept the streets spotless. The entire city was running on autopilot, waiting for people who would never return. They found similar scenes on every human world. On Kepler Station, the massive orbital habitat continued its slow rotation, providing artificial gravity for empty corridors. Manufacturing facilities produced goods with no one to collect them. Fusion reactors hummed with energy that powered vacant cities. The search teams explored carefully, looking for clues about what had happened. In homes, they found clothes hanging neatly in closets, kitchen tables set for meals that were never eaten, books lying open as if someone had just stepped away for a moment, but there were no signs of struggle. No evidence of evacuation, no bodies or graves or monuments to the dead. The humans had simply left, taking only personal items and leaving everything else in perfect condition. "Look at this," called Dr. Venth from the ethereal survey team. She was examining a house on Terra Nova, one of the oldest human colonies. "There's a note on the kitchen table." The message was handwritten in simple galactic standard. "Gone to find our place in the universe. Please take care of our garden. The roses need water every 3 days. Similar notes were found everywhere. Polite personal messages left by humans for whoever might come after them. They thanked neighbors for friendship. They left instructions for caring for pets that had been given to other families. They provided passwords for entertainment systems and recipes for favorite foods. It was as if they were going on a long trip and wanted to make sure everything would be taken care of while they were away. The most disturbing discovery came on humanity's capital world. In the center of New Washington, the planet's largest city, stood a new monument that hadn't been there 6 months earlier. It was simple but elegant, a circular plaza with statues representing every species in the Galactic Council. Each statue showed the species in a position of honor or achievement. The Corvins were depicted as master builders, shaping asteroids into useful structures. The Ethereals were shown as wise teachers, sharing knowledge with younger races. The Saurians appeared as noble warriors protecting the weak. Every species was represented at their best and most admirable. At the center of the plaza was a simple plaque. The inscription made several search team members go quiet when they read it. To our teachers in the Galactic Council, you showed us who we were by showing us who you were. We learned that every species has gifts to offer the universe. We learned that cooperation creates wonders that no single world can achieve alone. Most importantly, we learned that sometimes the best way to help is to step aside and let others find their own strength. Thank you for 40 years of lessons. The galaxy is ready for its next chapter. Captain Morvex of the Zephyrian exploration vessel Starseeker found himself staring at the monument for a long time. They're thanking us, he said slowly. But they're the ones who disappeared. Why are they thanking us? Dr. Zenth, who had joined the search expedition, flickered with confused colors. I think they're saying we taught them something, but I'm not sure what. More monuments were discovered on other human worlds. Each one honored different aspects of galactic civilization. On the mining world of Kepler's Rock, a statue showed Corvin miners as heroes who brought valuable resources to the galaxy. On the research station at Alpha Centauri, ethereal scientists were depicted as brilliant discoverers unlocking the secrets of the universe. But the most puzzling monument was found on Earth itself, humanity's birth world. In what used to be New York City, a massive structure had been built in the final months before the humans left. It wasn't a statue or a building. It was a garden. The garden was enormous, covering several city blocks. It contained plants from every world in the Galactic Council. Corvin crystal flowers grew next to Zephyrian memory vines. Ethereal light mosses shared space with Saurian flame leaves. Hundreds of different species of plants from across the galaxy, all growing together in perfect harmony. At the entrance to the garden was a simple sign. Every world has beauty to offer. Every species has wisdom to share. We learned this from you. Now it's your turn to learn it from each other. Search teams spent months combing through human space, but they found no trace of where the humans had gone. There were no records of ships leaving human worlds, no navigation logs showing departure routes, no communications with other species asking for help or refuge. The humans had simply vanished, leaving behind perfectly maintained worlds and a galaxy full of questions. The strangest part was the timing. Analysis of the abandoned settlements showed that humans had been leaving gradually over a period of 2 years. Small groups at first, then larger populations until entire worlds were empty. But they had coordinated their departure so precisely that no other species noticed until it was complete. They planned this, Admiral Zorex realized as he reviewed the data. This wasn't a sudden decision. They spent years preparing to leave, but why? The search teams found no evidence of dissatisfaction with galactic society. Human records showed active participation in council affairs right up until the end. Trade agreements were being negotiated. Scientific collaborations were ongoing. Diplomatic missions were scheduled. Everything looked normal until suddenly it wasn't. Dr. Krenex made perhaps the most unsettling discovery of all. While analyzing human computer systems, he found records of communication networks that had been operating in secret for decades. Humans across the galaxy had been talking to each other through channels that no other species knew existed. They had their own internet, he reported to the search fleet commanders. Completely separate from galactic networks, they were coordinating with each other in ways we never suspected. The communication logs were encrypted, but human computers had been left unlocked with access codes clearly displayed. It was as if the humans wanted other species to find these records but couldn't understand them. After 6 months of searching, the fleet returned to Nexus Prime with more questions than answers. The humans were gone but not destroyed. They had left voluntarily but with careful preparation. They had honored other species while abandoning them. Most puzzling of all, they seemed to have planned their departure as a gift to the galaxy, not an escape from it. President Veltar addressed the Council upon the fleet's return. "We found no humans," she announced to the packed chamber. "But we found evidence that they wanted us to find our own way forward." The empty human section of the Council chamber seemed larger than ever, a silent reminder of the species that had cared for the galaxy so well that they had somehow worked themselves out of a job, but worked toward what? And where had they gone to find it? 2 years after the humans disappeared, the Galactic Council was dying. The morning's emergency session had been called because the Corvin Mining Consortium and the Ethereal Collective were now officially at war. What had started as a minor dispute over mining rights in the Vega system had exploded into full military conflict. President Veltar watched the chaos from her position at the center of the council chamber. Her crystalline body flickered between angry red and exhausted gray, as delegates shouted at each other in a dozen different languages. "The Corvins attacked our research station without warning," Dr. Zenth accused, her ethereal form blazing with indignant light. "They destroyed 20 years of scientific work. Your researchers were stealing our minerals." Minister Voketh roared back, his rocky surface cracking with rage. "That asteroid belt belongs to the Corvin people." "According to whose authority?" General Krax interjected from the Saurian section. "The Saurian Empire has older claims to that entire system, and that's how it always went now." Every discussion became an argument. Every argument became a threat. Every threat moved them closer to violence. Veltar remembered when these same species had worked together beautifully. The Corvins would find valuable resources. The Ethereals would research new ways to use them. The Saurians would provide security for mining operations. It had been an elegant partnership that benefited everyone. But that was when Ambassador Chen had been sitting in the human section, quietly suggesting compromises that everyone could accept. "What if we tried this approach?" he would say in his calm voice, and somehow his simple suggestions would solve complex problems. Now the human section sat empty, and the species that had once cooperated were tearing each other apart. The war between the Corvins and Ethereals was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, old conflicts were resurging. The Altarian Defense Force had split into 3 factions, each claiming to be the legitimate government. The Zephyrian trade networks had collapsed when different crystal cities couldn't agree on fair pricing. Even the peaceful Nexari were having border disputes that threatened to turn violent. Trade had fallen by 60%. Scientific collaboration had almost stopped completely. The elegant web of interdependence that had connected thousands of worlds was unraveling faster each day. But the worst part was the blame. "This is all humanity's fault," General Krax declared during a brief pause in the shouting. "They abandoned us in our time of need." "Maybe we drove them away," suggested Captain Yurlix quietly. The Altarian naval officer looked tired. He had been trying to mediate between the warring factions in his own government, while keeping Altarian space from descending into chaos. "Drove them away?" Krax's eyes narrowed. "We welcomed humans into the council. We shared our knowledge with them. We treated them as equals even though they were primitive newcomers." Veltar winced at that. She was beginning to realize that treated them as equals might not be an accurate description of how the council had behaved toward a humanity. Dr. Morphix of the Zephyrian Science Division had been doing research into council records. What he found was uncomfortable to think about. "I've been reviewing the historical data," he said during a quiet moment. "In our first contact reports, we consistently described humans as emotionally unstable, intellectually limited, and socially immature." "Well, they were," Minister Voketh grumbled. "They cried at diplomatic meetings. They got excited about simple discoveries. They asked too many questions, did they?" Dr. Morphix asked. "Or did we just not understand their behavior?" The more they looked at the historical records, the more uncomfortable the picture became. Humans had been enthusiastic participants in galactic society, but they had also been consistently underestimated and dismissed. When humans suggested new approaches to old problems, Other species had smiled condescendingly and explained why the young race didn't understand how things worked. When humans offered to help with difficult negotiations, they were often relegated to minor administrative tasks while the experienced species handled the important decisions. And yet, somehow during humanity's 40-year membership, the galaxy had experienced unprecedented peace and prosperity. Kethvar had been one of the few council members who had genuinely liked working with humans. He found himself defending them even after they were gone. Ambassador Chen never took credit for his contributions, he pointed out during one heated debate. How many conflicts did he help resolve without anyone noticing? The answer was disturbing. Dr. Morphix's research team had identified 37 major conflicts that humans had helped mediate during their council membership. Not one had been officially credited to human diplomacy. The other species involved had claimed credit for the peaceful solutions. We used them, Veltar realized with growing horror. We let them do the difficult work and then acted like we had solved the problems ourselves. But the worst realization was still coming. 3 months after the Corvin Ethereal War began, Monitor Zex of the Nixari Intelligence Service presented a classified report to the council leadership. What he had discovered made everyone go quiet. The humans knew, he said simply. They knew this would happen when they left. He had been analyzing the timeline of human departure and comparing it to the progression of current conflicts. The correlation was impossible to ignore. Every war that has started since they left was already brewing when they were here, Monitor Zex explained. The territorial dispute between Corvins and Ethereals dates back 15 years. The Altarian political crisis has been building for a decade. The Zephyrian trade disagreements are even older. So? General Krax demanded. Old conflicts resurface all the time. But these didn't resurface while humans were here, Monitor Zex pointed out. Human diplomatic teams were managing all of these potential problems. They were preventing wars that none of us knew were about to start. The implications were staggering. Humans hadn't just been helpful members of galactic society. They had been actively preventing it from tearing itself apart. And they had done it so quietly, so efficiently, that no other species had noticed. The psychological impact of this realization was devastating. Species that had thought of themselves as wise and mature discovered they had been children being managed by the youngest member of their community. The beings they had dismissed as emotional and primitive had been the only thing standing between the galaxy and chaos. Why didn't they tell us? Dr. Xanth asked during an emergency council session. Her ethereal form was dim with shame. Veltar had been wondering the same thing. If humans had been doing so much important work, why had they been so secretive about it? Why hadn't they demanded recognition or credit? The answer came from an unlikely source. Deep in the human embassy's abandoned computers, a Corvin technician found personal logs that Ambassador Chen had kept during his years of service. The access codes had been left clearly visible, as if humans wanted other species to read them after they were gone. Chen's entries painted a picture that made everyone uncomfortable. Another successful mediation today between the Altarian factions. They still think Commander Tralix came up with the compromise solution on his own. I'm happy to let him take credit. The important thing is that the conflict is resolved. Dr. Xanth seems frustrated with her protein research again. I suggested she try approaching the problem from a different angle, but I framed it as a question rather than advice. She'll figure it out and think she discovered the solution herself. Her confidence is more important than my ego. The Corvin ethereal mining dispute is heating up. I've been quietly encouraging both sides to consider a joint research venture. Minister Voketh is suspicious of direct suggestions, but he responds well to carefully planted ideas. I think we can avoid conflict if I'm patient. Entry after entry showed the same pattern, humans providing crucial help, while carefully avoiding any appearance of leadership or superiority. They had managed galactic affairs like parents guiding children, always making sure the children felt capable and independent. But why? Why had humans been so careful not to hurt other species' pride? The answer came in one of Chen's final entries, written just weeks before humanity's departure. I think we're finally ready to leave. The other species have learned so much over the past 40 years. They're becoming more cooperative, more innovative, more willing to find peaceful solutions. They don't need us to hold their hands anymore. The hardest part is that they still don't realize how much they've grown. They think we were the junior partners in this relationship. They don't understand that we were the teachers, not the students. But that's okay. Good teachers help their students become independent. We've done our job. Now it's time to let them find their own way. The council chamber fell silent as Veltar read this entry aloud. The implication was clear and devastating. Humans hadn't left because they were unhappy or oppressed. They had left because they believed their work was finished. They had guided galactic civilization to a point where they thought it could function without them. They had been wrong. We failed them, Veltar said quietly. They spent 40 years teaching us to be better, and we never even realized we were being taught. The empty human section of the council chamber had become a symbol of their failure. The species that had quietly held the galaxy together had worked themselves out of a job, leaving behind Sti 3 years after humanity vanished. They came back. Not to stay. Just to say goodbye properly. The ship appeared at the edge of Nexus Prime's system on a quiet Tuesday morning. Long-range sensors picked it up immediately. A sleek vessel unlike any design in the galactic databases. It was clearly human-built, but advanced beyond anything humanity had possessed when they left. Within hours, every military fleet in the system was scrambling to respond. The Galactic Council, what remained of it, called an emergency session. President Veltar's crystalline form blazed with desperate hope as she addressed the scattered delegates. A human ship has returned, she announced. This is our chance to bring them home. But the ship wasn't cooperating with their plans. It hung in space just beyond the system's outer planets, broadcasting on all frequencies but refusing to respond to communications. The message it sent was simple. It would speak but not listen. Admiral Zorex of what used to be the Unified Altarian Defense Force led the response flotilla. His ships approached carefully, ready for anything. The past 3 years had made everyone paranoid about surprises. Human vessel, this is Admiral Zorex, he transmitted. We request permission to come aboard and discuss terms for your return to the Galactic Council. The human ship's response was not what anyone expected. Admiral, this is Captain Sarah Chen, daughter of former Ambassador David Chen. I'm afraid we're not here to return. We're here to explain why we left and to say goodbye properly this time. The voice was warm and familiar, yet somehow different. There was a confidence in it that hadn't been there before, a sense of purpose that spoke of growth and change. Please gather all available council delegates, Captain Chen continued. What we have to say concerns everyone. Over the next 6 hours, representatives from across the galaxy converged on Nexus Prime. Even species that had withdrawn from the council sent observers. The Corvin ethereal war was temporarily paused. Border conflicts went quiet. For the first time in 3 years, the galaxy held its breath and listened together. The message began at exactly solar noon, Galactic Standard Time. Captain Sarah Chen appeared on screens throughout the system. She looked human, but something was different. Her eyes held depths that seemed older than her apparent age. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of someone who had seen beyond the edges of known space. 3 years ago, my people withdrew from galactic society. We did so quietly because we didn't want to cause panic or disruption. We see now that our silence caused more harm than our honesty would have. For that we apologize. In the council chamber, delegates leaned forward, desperate for answers. Why had humanity left? Where had they gone? Were they coming back? We left because we finally understood what we were, Captain Chen continued. For 40 years we participated in galactic civilization thinking we were learning from you. We believed we were the primitive species being taught by our advanced neighbors. We were wrong. Veltar felt her crystalline structure tremble. Around the chamber, other delegates shifted uncomfortably. We weren't the students. We were the teachers. And our lesson plan was complete. The words hit like a shockwave. In the Corvin section, Minister Voketh's rocky exterior cracked audibly. General Krax's reptilian eyes widened in disbelief. From the moment we joined the council, we saw a galaxy full of amazing species who had forgotten how to work together. You had incredible knowledge, vast resources, and remarkable abilities, but you were trapped by your own assumptions about how civilization should function. Captain Chen's image paused, as if giving them time to process the implications. So we became what you needed us to be. We became the mediators who helped you resolve conflicts, the coordinators who made your systems run efficiently, the innovators who asked the simple questions that led to breakthrough discoveries. We became the glue that held your civilization together. But we did it in a way that let you think you were managing yourselves. We never took credit because we didn't want to damage your confidence. We worked behind the scenes because we knew you would resist direct guidance from the primitive humans. In the viewing chamber, Dr. Zenth flickered with shame. She remembered the condescending way she had treated human researchers, always explaining things as if they were children who couldn't understand complex concepts. We spent 40 years teaching you to be better than you thought you could be. We helped you discover that cooperation was more powerful than competition, that different perspectives made everyone stronger, that even the smallest contribution could solve the biggest problems. Captain Chen smiled, and there was genuine warmth in the expression. And you learned beautifully. By the time we left, you had become everything we hoped you could be. You were ready to manage galactic civilization without us. Admiral Zorex found his voice. But we failed. Everything fell apart when you left. Wars broke out. Trade collapsed. The Council is barely functioning. I know, Captain Chen said gently. And that's exactly what we expected would happen. The statement sent shockwaves through the gathered delegates. They had expected humanity? They had wanted the galaxy to fall apart? Growing up is painful, Captain Chen explained. When parents leave home, their children often struggle at first. They make mistakes. They fight over resources. They forget the lessons they learned while they were being protected and guided. But eventually, if the teaching was good, the children remember. They find their own strength. They learn to cooperate not because someone is managing them, but because they choose to work together. She gestured to something off-screen, and the view expanded to show the bridge of her ship. It was filled with humans, but they looked different from the ones who had left. They moved with quiet confidence, their faces bearing the marks of people who had found their true purpose. We didn't leave because we were unhappy with galactic society, Captain Chen continued. We left because we had found our calling. We're not meant to be citizens of your galaxy. We're meant to be teachers of civilizations. The implications were staggering. Dr. Morphix was the first to understand. You're saying there are other galaxies? Other civilizations that need guidance? The universe is vast beyond imagination, Captain Chen confirmed. Full of young species making the same mistakes, facing the same challenges. Species that could become wonderful civilizations if someone just helped them learn to work together. That's what we are. That's what we've always been. We're the bridge builders, the peacemakers, the teachers who help others find their potential. Earth was never our permanent home. It was our nursery, where we learned to be what the universe needed. She paused again, her expression growing more serious. But our work with you isn't finished. You're struggling now because you're still thinking like students instead of graduates. You're waiting for someone else to solve your problems instead of remembering that you have the knowledge and ability to solve them yourselves. In the council chamber, delegates began looking at each other differently. The Corvins and Ethereals who had been at war suddenly seemed to remember why they had been allies for so long. The infrastructure we left behind will maintain itself for decades if you care for it properly. The knowledge we shared remains in your databases and your memories. The diplomatic techniques we taught you are still effective if you choose to use them. Most importantly, you've proven that cooperation creates miracles. In the past 3 years, despite all your conflicts, you've also achieved remarkable things. The joint rescue mission to find us was the largest cooperative effort in galactic history. Even now, in the middle of wars and disputes, species are still helping each other when emergencies arise. Captain Chen leaned forward, her eyes filled with the kind of love a teacher feels for students who are almost ready to graduate. You don't need us anymore. You need to believe in yourselves. But what if we fail? President Veltar asked, her crystalline form shifting to worried blue. What if we can't maintain the peace you helped us build? Then you'll learn from your mistakes and try again, Captain Chen replied. That's what growing civilizations do. They fail, they learn, they improve. We can't protect you from that process forever, nor should we. She stood up, and behind her, the view showed stars wheeling past as her ship prepared to leave the system. We're going to the Andromeda Galaxy next. There's a young civilization there that's on the verge of destroying itself with resource wars. After that, we've detected signals from the Magellanic clouds that suggest another species is ready for guidance. This is our purpose. This is who we were meant to become, and we couldn't have learned to be teachers without first being students in your galaxy. The transmission began to fade, but her final words came through clearly. Thank you for teaching us who we were meant to be. Now go be the amazing civilization we always knew you could become. The human ship vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a galaxy full of species who suddenly understood what they had lost and what they had gained. In the council chamber, an extraordinary thing happened. General Krax of the Saurian Empire stood up and walked over to Minister Voketh of the Corvin Consortium. Without a word, he extended his clawed hand,